Two people who kept missing each other until fate intervened. Have you ever wondered how many times you've crossed paths with the person you're meant to be with without even knowing it? This is the story of Ethan and Sophie, two people whose lives touched again and again, yet somehow they always missed each other, until fate decided it had waited long enough. Ethan Parker was 28 years old and lived in a small apartment in Seattle. He worked as a graphic designer and spent most of his days creating beautiful things for other people, while feeling that something was missing from his own life. Sophie Bennett was 26, a school teacher who loved books, coffee shops, and rainy afternoons. She lived only a few miles away from Ethan, but their worlds never seemed to align. What neither of them knew was that fate had already begun trying to bring them together. Their first near meeting happened 5 years earlier. Ethan was rushing through an airport after almost missing his flight to Chicago. At the same moment, Sophie was sitting near the boarding gate, reading a novel while waiting for the exact same flight. Ethan arrived just as boarding ended. Sophie looked up briefly as he hurried past. For a fraction of a second, their eyes met. Then, he disappeared down the jet bridge. They spent 3 hours on the same airplane without exchanging a single word. When the plane landed, Sophie left through one exit, while Ethan left through another. Neither remembered the encounter. Years passed. Their second new meeting happened in a downtown bookstore. Sophie had picked up a copy of a best-selling romance novel and carried it around the store for nearly an hour. At the checkout counter, she suddenly changed her mind and placed the book back on a nearby shelf. 20 minutes later, Ethan walked into the same bookstore.
Looking for something new to read, he grabbed the very same book from the shelf Sophie had returned it to. Inside was a handwritten note that had slipped between the pages. The note wasn't from Sophie. It simply read, "Love often arrives when you're no longer looking for it." Ethan smiled and bought the book. Across town, Sophie sat in a cafe, wondering why she suddenly felt disappointed for not purchasing it. Again, fate had tried. Again, they missed each other. One rainy autumn afternoon, Sophie attended her best friend's engagement party. The celebration was held at a large restaurant overlooking the waterfront. Ethan had also been invited, not because he knew the couple personally. His coworker was related to the groom and had an extra invitation. For nearly 2 hours, Ethan and Sophie occupied the same room. At one point, Sophie stepped outside onto the balcony to enjoy the view. Just seconds before she arrived, Ethan had left the exact same spot. The timing was almost unbelievable.
Inside the restaurant, they stood in the same buffet line. A group of guests stepped between them. Then, someone called Ethan's name. He turned away. By the time he looked back, Sophie was gone. Once more, fate sighed in frustration. The following year brought unexpected challenges. Sophie's father became seriously ill. She spent months helping her family while balancing work and responsibilities. Love was the last thing on her mind. Ethan faced struggles of his own. A long-term relationship ended unexpectedly, leaving him questioning whether he would ever find the right person. Life seemed determined to keep them apart. Yet every setback was quietly shaping them into the people they needed to become. Sometimes, timing matters as much as connection. Meeting too early can be just as wrong as never meeting at all. One spring morning, Sophie decided she needed a fresh start. She signed up for a weekend photography workshop. It wasn't something she normally did, but she wanted to challenge herself. The workshop had only 20 participants. On the first day, Sophie arrived 10 minutes late. As she entered the room,
every seat appeared occupied, except one, a single empty chair near the back. She walked toward it. At that exact moment, Ethan entered through another door carrying camera equipment. He had nearly canceled that morning. A last-minute work project had kept him awake the previous night, but something convinced him to attend. The instructor looked around. "Perfect," he said. "We have one seat left." It was the chair beside Sophie. For the first time in their lives, fate finally succeeded. "Looks like we're partners," Ethan said with a friendly smile. Sophie smiled back. "Looks like it."
Neither realized how many times they had nearly met before. The workshop required participants to spend the day photographing the city together. As they walked through parks, markets, and busy streets, conversation came naturally. There was no awkwardness, no forced small talk. Everything simply flowed. They discussed books, travel, dreams, childhood memories, and favorite places. Hours felt like minutes. By sunset, both were surprised when the instructor announced the day was over. As they packed their cameras, Ethan hesitated. Then he asked, "Would you like to get coffee sometime?" Sophie's answer came immediately. "I'd love to." Their first official date lasted nearly 5 hours.
Then came another, and another. For the first time, neither felt the need to pretend. They laughed easily, shared the same values, supported each other's ambitions. Months later, while looking through old photographs online, Sophie discovered something strange. She found a picture from her friend's engagement party. In the background stood Ethan, only a few feet away. She stared at the image, then showed him. "Wait," Ethan said. "I was there." The discovery sparked curiosity. Together, they began comparing stories. The airport, the bookstore, the engagement party. Again and again, they uncovered moments where they had nearly crossed paths. The coincidences seemed impossible, yet there they were.
Proof that their lives had been circling each other for years. One evening, they sat beside the waterfront watching the sun disappear beyond the horizon. Sophie leaned against Ethan's shoulder. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if we'd met earlier?" she asked. Ethan considered the question. "Sometimes." "And?" He smiled. "I think we would have liked each other." "That's not exactly an answer." "No," he said softly. "I think fate knew what it was doing." Sophie looked at him. "What do you mean?" "If we'd met years ago, I wouldn't have been the person you needed." He paused. "And maybe you wouldn't have been the person I needed either." For a moment, neither spoke. The waves rolled quietly against the shore. Then Sophie nodded. "I think you're right." 2 years later, Ethan planned a surprise. He brought Sophie back to the photography studio where they had first met. The room was empty, except for framed photographs hanging along the walls. Pictures from their adventures together, trips they had taken, moments they had shared, memories they had built. At the center of the room stood a single photograph. The picture from the engagement party, the one where they had unknowingly stood only feet apart. Below it was a small plaque. It read, "Almost." Sophie smiled through tears, then noticed Ethan kneeling beside her, holding a ring. "I think fate worked very hard to bring us together," he said. She laughed while crying. "It definitely did."
So let's not make it work any harder. Sophie Bennett, will you marry me? Her answer came before he finished speaking. Yes.
A year later, family and friends gathered to celebrate their wedding. During the reception, guests shared stories about the couple. The room filled with laughter and happiness. When it was Ethan's turn to speak, he looked at Sophie and smiled. I used to believe love was something you searched for. He paused. Now I think love sometimes searches for you. The room grew silent. Sometimes it takes the long road. Sometimes it arrives later than expected. Sometimes it misses the train, misses the flight, misses the moment. He squeezed Sophie's hand. But if it's real, it keeps finding its way back. Sophie smiled through happy tears, and everyone in the room understood. Some stories are about perfect timing. Others are about patience, about becoming the right people before meeting the right person. Ethan and Sophie spent years missing each other, yet every missed opportunity led them exactly where they needed to be. Because fate wasn't keeping them apart. It was preparing them for the moment when they would finally meet. And when that moment came, neither of them missed it. The end.